Welcome to Marketing from Scratch, a CXXO Masterclass series where we have an opportunity to converse with leaders who have built iconic brands and learn from them their marketing strategies. I'm Vani from Kalari Capital, and today I'm really excited. We have Malini with us, and before we go ahead, I hope everyone had a great Diwali break and you all wore sunscreen when you were out, and we're going to talk about a little bit of that today. Malini's journey is really interesting, and we have had the privilege of watching it up close from idea to the growth and validation she has created. And we are very proud that she's also a founder in our CXXO tribe, starting with and Malini, welcome. It's wonderful to have you, and today discussing that journey of deconstruct and in a way deconstructing the success you have had. I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you so much, Vani. Thank you so much for making Deconstruct a part of the CXXO and been supporting for a long time. I mean, no one better than you who'd seen it close. So excited to do this with you.
I want to ask you, sometimes a space feels or a subject feels very crowded, and, personal care is not something new. We have had it for eons in whatever personal care meant in terms of products. So it feels like there is enough and more products in personal care, and it's a crowded space. Of course, there is always room for new products, and uh, uh, products are getting better and better, more sophisticated, but it's not for the faint hearted to start a company in something which is an existing space, because you really have to carve out the niche very carefully and communicate. So how did you process all of that when you chose to plunge with your idea of starting a company broadly in the personal care space? Of course, we're going to talk about what is different about the product and all that, but how did you convince yourself that this is what you wanted to do, had to do?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, I rather than the space, what I always enjoyed or what where my professional, experience lied was in building brands. I would say I worked with PNG, I worked with Kraft Times, I worked with Flipkart. So I've seen great brands. Or I worked with great brands that were already built out, and so that always, was a personal interest area along with what I had actually done in my past career. um, and when I thought, I set about that, okay, I really want to build a brand in India, because I also as a consumer felt that there are a lot of white spaces, so let's just like look at each one of it. And when I came across personal care, I was very, very excited about the opportunity size, number one. And number two, there were so many evolving trends and not a lot of brands were catering to that. So I'm talking about like 5 years back. That definitely, I think we've come a long way in the last 5 years for beauty and personal care as a category. It does feel extremely cluttered today, but at that point in time, I did feel that there were a lot of areas where, or white spaces where, you can actually build decently big size brands. And number three, I was like just 3 years before I started Deconstruct, I studied at INSEAD, which was in France. I've seen, like, how a French pharmacy or a French beauty and personal care shelf looked like versus how India's looked like. And that actually gave me a lot of motivation that you can actually bring forward science backed, evidence first products onto the consumers shelves, retail shelves rather, because there are no I would say anything from a regulation perspective that was stopping you to bring something, a very science backed product, onto the retail shelf. So these were the few motivations for me to kind of from a business size perspective as well. I felt like there was a good opportunity size, and I also saw a white space in terms of building a big enough brand, and my personal experience and skill set lies here, so it all came in together here.
Malini, there is always this sort of debate on founder market fit. Okay. Some founders are technologists, some founders are very product centric, some founders may be sales centric or marketing centric. Of course, a founder will need to pick up all the other skills too, even if they have something that's a deeper core competency. And when it comes to something like a personal care brand like you have created, first of all, do you see yourself when you started, we all evolve, and today I'm sure you have a much more rounded bouquet of skill sets. So when you started, did you see yourself as product centric or brand centric? And maybe you didn't think about it, but to the extent you you thought about that, but you have built a great brand. How did you, get to learning what you're going to do, how you're going to go about doing that in areas that was not your core competency?
Yeah, sure. So I think probably first I'll answer as to how I approach this. I really never thought that let's go product centric or let's go brand centric first. What I actually went with is a philosophy that, I want to give the best quality products to the consumer, and with a few core tenets. Okay, transparency is a tenet I would definitely do not want to compromise on. Product quality is a tenet I do not want to compromise on. And then, putting in a lot of thought about like what ingredients go into it is something I do not want to compromise on. So I think there are a few tenets which I really worked by and said that let's give the best product forward to the consumer. So that was the thought process. I built with, at the start, of course, like really did not think through strategically, but in lag, now I feel probably that's the best way to go forward, because you make a product the center or hero of your brand, and then you do the brand building around that product. And that's basically, I would say, a more gradual and an easy way of building a brand, rather than going forward and because brand is what, nothing but a personality, right? And product is actually a like a hardcore product. So you would rather give a hardcore product and build a personality around it, rather than saying that, okay, I'll build a personality and then I'll force fit my product into it. So I feel this is I mean, in lag, I feel like whatever we had gone forward with Deconstruct did seem right. But then again, I think it totally depends on which category you're working at, and how crowded the category is. What will be your differentiation there? I think it depends on a lot of things for sure. But for beauty and personal care, that seemed to be the right step that we've done.
Mm,
And then to answer the other question, you don't have how would, now there are skill sets available, but how did you go about building it? I think as a founder, I feel that you need to do a lot of dirty work yourself. You need to get into the detail of it. I really got into the detail of understanding the product, understanding the ingredients. So that is something I mean, two things definitely I have done, and really got into the detail of it is the product part of it, and second bit is the entire customer service or customer experience part of it. So these were the two things, right? I mean, I was handling all the chats myself, in the first 6 months, and I was answering all the emails myself, because there were a lot
mm,
of questions around what is in the product, right? Why should I choose this product over something else? And then these kind of technical questions were coming in. I felt, okay, it is right that I kind of sit there and answer those questions. So these were the two things I really got my hands dirty with. And as a founder, I feel, you need to really get out of your comfort zone. Don't hire agencies to kind of do that work which you think is the core of your brand.
mm. So we'll come to those learnings in a bit, but I have a different question. uh, there is a conventional wisdom, and we think of founders as pioneers because they come along and they do something that bucks the conventional wisdom, and then we have new learnings on how to build a company, and new wisdom that emerges out of that. Where I'm going with this is, if you think of Nika, of course they're a marketplace, I get that, or Sephora, and their offline retail, they have lots of products, right? Lot of SKUs. Even if you think of a brand, let's call it Forest Essentials, they have a lot of SKUs. But you did something very different, which on the surface would not be conventional wisdom, because we think um, consumers want a lot of choice. I mean, that's one prevalent thought. But what you did was to build first a hero product and not a bouquet of products, right? So why did you make that choice? Did you know it was gonna work out, or you didn't see that as a risk at all, but it paid off? So, want to understand how you chose the product lineup.
Yeah, so I think it is as conventional as it can get, because coming in from a PNG and a Kraft Heinz, they all of them have a very strong Pareto. 20% of their products do 80% of the revenue, and that's
Yeah,
always existed with your traditional FMCG companies, traditional FMCG brands. But think of D2C, I think no one was actually following that playbook. They were like, okay, I mean, let's put in as many products as possible, let's cater to every trend possible. So
yeah.
I think the hat I put in here is coming in from a PNG and a Kraft Heinz. I thought, like, why don't we marry what was done traditionally, but then try to do differently with your D2C marketing? And that's basically how the approach came about. Because I think traditional FMCG companies always did that, hero product philosophy, because they were doing marketing in an ATL manner. They do not want to dilute the mindset of the consumer. But from D2C companies, you have so much mind space of the consumer. There's so much performance marketing access that you have. But, like, if you think about it, that has become so excessive, the entire performance marketing. If you actually don't own something, you just lost, right? So it's a cycle, is what I feel. And now we are at that cycle where it is like, okay, there's so many things, so many companies are saying about so many products, but then there's no takeaway of what this brand stands for. If you
Hmm,
want to break that clutter, you really bring an iconic product forward and say that, again, this cuts across everything, and here you go, I'm giving you a brilliant product, and just talk about that. So, to be very honest, from an execution perspective, it was not that easy, because it was like, around 8 to 12 months of research behind what is that hero product we want to select, which category do we want to select in, and do we have the right product to kind of cater to that white space, or that one small degree of innovation we figured, right? For example, a sunscreen, which is a hero product of ours. We all, like, one thing all sunscreens in the market were solving for was white cast.
hmm,
But as a sunscreen user myself, I always wondered, like, is white card cast the biggest thing, or is it
hmm,
something else? And I always felt that it was the greasiness that comes in later. So why don't we solve for it? Why are we solve? Because everyone was solving for white cast doesn't necessarily mean we need to solve for white cast. And I, as a sunscreen user, feel greasiness is what you have to solve for, and we try to solve for it.
hmm,
So that one degree, change in innovation, understanding your consumer thoroughly,
hmm,
really figuring out if that insight can be actually built into a sizable market opportunity, like understanding if that really exists, the size of price, and then having that right product, and then entering the market. So it was definitely a longish exercise.
hmm,
And then, of course, right, I mean, the same thought process can occur to many people, but then thankfully it did not, and we were first in the market to launch something around like non greasiness or sunscreen for oily skin, and it worked for us. It was scary to kind of put 80 to 90% of your marketing budget into one product, but we
hmm.
just thought, let's try it out and do it. It's fine, like, let's do it for 3 months. If it pays off, it pays off. Otherwise, we'll change the strategy. So, and then it worked for sure. So yeah, that's where it is. I think it was always a conventional wisdom to build a hero product, and we actually brought it into the new age space, I would say.
So, Malini, let's talk about sunscreens. You know, it's a different consumer has a different education today on products. I mean, but I know growing up we had never heard of a sunscreen. Okay, let alone, and I'm talking about me, right? You are of course decades younger to me. Never heard of a sunscreen, let alone go buy and apply. And even in US, I was like, we have Indian skin. We don't need sunscreen. We grew up in the sun or whatever. I think it's only in the last 2 decades maybe that I started regularly applying sunscreen. So early part of my life, I never applied sunscreen at all, which is probably true for many Indians. So it's not a familiar, it's not like, oh yeah, uptan powder, right? My mother used to make it, I don't want to make it, but I'll buy it, right? So it's a very different pattern which is focusing on convenience. Here you were, for India at least, creating a category. Sunscreen is not new in other parts of the world, but there's a lot of education also, right? When you go after a category, you think you're done with that awareness and education, or that's just a small pocket of India that understands. My point is, do you see this as a deep market that will continue to grow, or is the market size already fixed? How do you see the evolution of this hero product market?
Sunscreen as a market, if you think about it, I think it very quickly grew into a sizable market. Of course, it actually came in much later and then very quickly grew, is what I would say. I mean, as Deconstruct, we did a bit by understanding why is the penetration so low despite Indians needing a sunscreen, and we figured out it's because of the textures, and we try to bring in that textural change into the market. Because if you look at textures that are coming from Europe or American markets are very greasy, like the sun filters that are used are very heavy, and that's not suitable for a humid country like India. So that's where
Mm,
I think brands like us together change the way how sunscreen is perceived or sunscreen is used in India, because it was very inconvenient to use up the sunscreen, though the
right.
benefits of it were kind of known to people, like at least your early adopters knew it, but they just didn't find that convenience come through, and I think brands like us brought in that convenience. So
Mm,
that's what we have done here. But from an education perspective, I think we are still far ahead, right? I mean, if you have like a 70 to 80% penetration of a face wash and a face moisturizer as a category, as
mm,
sunscreen category, you are at a 25 to 30% penetration.
mm,
25
mm,
to 30% penetration for a category that grew 3 years back is crazy numbers. I mean, the kind of growth we've seen is unheard of before. But I
mm,
still feel there is a lot more penetration that can be done, because the benefits are well known to the consumers. Consumers seek those benefits. You just have to give those convenience in terms of format, in terms of texture, in terms of extra benefits along with sun protection. So whatever is the consumer seeking for, you need to kind of as a brand keep innovating. So I think the market still exists, the innovation will have to happen continuously, and I see like it'll only grow forward.
mm. So, Malini, let's talk about sales, and sorry, hold on 1 second. You always. So, let's talk about sales, and specifically for products, consumer products, right? Any consumer products. You can't do without marketplaces. It's very hard to exist without being present on marketplaces, uh, and so you have to be there. But your brand also gets really lost in a marketplace. You, however, have a very strong brand association and affiliation you've created with your customers, whether they go to XYZ marketplace to buy or come to your website to buy. So, what is the ideal mix from consumer traffic for marketplace to self website? Of course, that we can't say 100% to self website because that won't happen. And that will just be a pipe dream. So, but what is the ideal mix? And more importantly, how did you, create that brand lift and loyalty with customers while also leveraging the advantages of the marketplace?
Sure. So I think one of the, I think like one word which we actually use so much, like which I've also used, is a D2C brand, which I think we've adopted it from the West, right? So
Mm,
I think we have to separate out the part D2C and separate out the part brand, because D2C is ultimately a channel. And, in a complex, logistically complex country like India, building a D2C distribution is not an easy game, right? So for me, D2C is the distribution part and brand is the brand part. So I think what essentially, like, I think that kind of clarity, I mean, I kind of got in very early on, and I said that let's build brand first and look at distribution later, because there are already a lot of great distribution channels that are already built on, right? Like, there's Amazon, Nika, and of course, right, the new age quick commerce. So they are solving that job for us from a distribution perspective. So let's look at the brand building part, because
Mm.
again, right, that is probably the answer also to the question. If you have so many marketplaces, you cannot not do away without being present on them. So
Yeah.
but then if you actually have a certain brand equity built out, or a certain, like, personality as a brand, and why people are looking for you, then half the job is kind of done despite of being on that platform. So I think that's something, that's the clarity I went with. Let's target on brand and forget like how much you are actually getting through your D2C website.
Mm.
Um, so yes, and to answer the second question as to how did we go about building the brand per se, so as I said, like, we first definitely build out the product, and then we try to understand why we are different and how we are different. But I think that is one thing we've always set in our formulations from day one, that despite we playing in the larger science backed space where efficacy is, if is the norm, we said that we'll have to bring something along with the norm. And if it is efficacy is the norm or the table stakes, what are people, like, worried about, right? In case if everyone is worried about like high efficacy, means okay, if it gives me some sort of side effects because it's really working on my skin, or it's will it give me a reaction. So that's where we try to bring in what Deconstruct stands for differently. That's not efficacy but also gentleness. We said that we are just not effective, we are also gentle. And gentleness doesn't necessarily mean only for a sensitive skin, right? That's why I said for oily skin, sunscreens were not gentle, and we brought in a sunscreen that's gentle for every skin type. And that's how we built the brand philosophy and extended from it into other categories as well. So, and that personality of the brand being effective yet gentle, like, translates on to converting the end customer even on marketplaces today. So I think the next step for us is to build the entire D2C network. But yeah, at this point in time, the task at hand or job at hand is to build the brand.
You know, building a brand at some level, people think is about what is the budget available, right? And of course, it's true, budgets are necessary, but most companies, um, Nike, when they're young or beginning, don't have unlimited budget, but what they have is unlimited creativity. And again, they pioneer a way to get their brand to stand out. And of course, later marketing budgets evolve, and you might have lots of, I mean, today, Nike would have a huge marketing budget. But when they started, and all of us are familiar with their story of how they went about building a brand. So, what is Deconstruct's story? Not where you're throwing money at the problem, but on approaching brand building, especially because, obviously, we are both doing this conversation because we want to pay forward for other founders to learn from our learnings, and to the extent that they can take away from this conversation a couple of things that they can apply in their journey as inspiration. Mm, we'd be very happy, right? So, how did you do this budget to brand logic for yourself and getting more for your money than, say, for example, large companies can get, right? So you have to, as a young company startup, get more for your limited money in terms of brand outcomes.
Yeah, I think the most underrated thing, which not like a lot of I mean, in marketing sessions that are not talked about, is how deeply you need to understand the consumer. I think there is
Mm.
no substitute, no amount of money thrown at it can solve that problem. Understanding the consumer has to be done by the founder, by your leadership teams. And if you actually fail to do that, well, it's
You'll be
it's
spending
just
money.
exactly, it's just throwing money at it without really getting that result. So I think that's the most important thing. And that, I don't think you need money to solve that. What does a consumer need, or what is that white space consumer is seeking for, and where sometimes consumers might not even know that such kind of a convenience can be available. So it is, as a as someone building the brand, you should figure out, is this convenience that I'm giving will it be beneficial to the consumer or not? So you need to do a lot of hypothesis yourself and validate and disvalidate them with consumers. So I
Mm.
think like being on top of consumers, understanding needs, and and what are they seeking next, and putting that in the form of innovation, I think is the most important thing. And I mean, exactly as I told you about the sunscreen example, so whatever we figured out and whatever strategic exercise we have done, that Indian consumers are seeking sunscreen that is not greasy or not heavy, really did not come with a lot of money thrown at it. It came in with a lot of time, invested in talking to the consumers, and like understanding their needs, and then figuring out multiple hypotheses and validating, disvalidating them. So I think that's the easiest hack when you do not have money, or rather even if you have money, to kind of build a brand, I would say.
But Malini, let's hack into that a little bit more, okay? So you saw a need, which is I, the consumer, don't want the greasiness, especially when you're wearing it all day and it's not just you're going for a walk or gymming, you're going to work and you still are going to wear your sunscreen. You don't want it to be greasy. I get that. As a consumer, I get that, but how do you reach that message to me? That's marketing. One is product positioning, which you got it, you found that little nugget of insight around which you build a science based product. But how do you reach me with that message? There is product packaging, of course, but beyond the product packaging, how do you reach that consumer with that message efficiently? What distribution models did you use that worked for you? You don't have a lot of money to do IPL advertising, so at that stage, so what do you do?
Correct. So I think creativity, right? That's the next big thing as to how do you creatively communicate to, and just not about creativity in communication, but creativity in respect to out of box ideas. So what we did very differently was, um, we said that as Deconstruct, a brand that we also, like, when we are saying highly effective yet gentle products, one of the things we realized is that, can you go after a certain target group creatively, so that you are actually not fighting it out there, right, with everyone. And that's where we figured out a few TGs that actually worked very well for us, where sunscreen was on the grow, and no one
Mm,
was catering them, which was basically tier 2 and tier 3 markets, because
mm,
everyone was actually concentrating on tier 1 market. We said, let's go after tier 2 and tier 3 markets, and let's see, why don't we just operate in this space, because definitely the awareness is increasing. I mean, that is
mm,
what we figured out from our consumer calls, but no one was actually catering to them, or no one was consciously making that effort to kind of reach out to them. So that is definitely a creative solve we've actually done, right?
mm,
And then, as I'm saying, creativity in terms of how do you use that data and insight it creatively. Second thing is creativity with respect to just communication. We
mm,
basically said that, I mean, like, if you're saying that you are a good sunscreen that doesn't leave greasiness or oiliness, let's see if you put it in an experimentative format. We took in blotting paper, and we put in our product on the blotting paper, and we said that, hey, listen, like, it doesn't seep out any oil. It's clear that the product doesn't have any oil, and hence you wouldn't feel greasy on the skin. So I mean, this is like real pure form of creativity with respect to communication. So I think creativity is very, very underrated. Like, I mean, I'm an engineer, and even as an engineer, how do you look at data and like creatively insight it? As I told you about how did we go after tier 2, tier 3 markets, is also creativity. So I think that's something we've definitely did it very differently. But
mm,
I mean, of course, kudos to the team who's actually executed it and gotten into the detail. And but all of this cannot happen if you don't really get into the detail of your data, of your consumer understanding of where your consumers are coming in from, what their needs are. So I think understanding consumer and then using creativity where you're breaking the mold, either through the way you're communicating, or to who you're communicating and how you're communicating. I think
mm,
that definitely helps. But I don't want to undermine the importance of capital in all of this. All of this can be done, that you are doing these exercises on the side, is also because you have that capital cushion with you. So
mm.
definitely capital is equally important along with all of these. But I think it can be done by efficiently using that capital, I would say.
But let's continue to talk about this topic, but maybe from a different lens. The consumer, in India, anywhere, but in India more so, we are all a consumer of one. I use sunscreen, I use yours every day, and I'm 61. My daughter is 26, she uses sunscreen. She doesn't live here, so she uses some other sunscreen. But nonetheless, right? So if she's a different customer for you. And you talked about somebody else in, let's say, not in Bangalore, but maybe they're living in a different uh, uh, uh,
Yeah, tier
uh,
two, like a Mysore kind of a thing,
yeah,
or a
and then
Bangalore.
you need to communicate to them differently, right? How, and again, what can we abstract from your learnings for others? Do you just communicate the same to everybody? And even if the message is the same, what about channels? I may not be looking at Insta, I may be looking at something else, whereas definitely a 26-year-old is probably only looking at Insta. So how do you find channels of communication and nuancing the message for communication? For example, you talked about Greece, but in my case, I'm not somebody who in the middle of the day can again remember and put sunscreen again. In the morning, okay, make it a habit, put it, get out. But, at work, I can't remember to put it, So I think we lost Malini. I'm sure she will join back. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And I do see your comments. If you have questions, I'll try to ask her when she joins back. But let's figure out what's going on with Malini, and she dropped. I hope this sessions are useful. You can uh, put your thoughts on the comments, whether uh, these learning from another founder and their journey is something that adds value in your decision process and your own journey, whether you're building a brand today or not, whether you're a founder or not. These are information and learning we take and we apply into our life again and again. But let me see what's happening with uh, Malini, and I'll come back to you. Just stay on and let me check. Okay. She's joining back in just a few seconds. So let's hold till there. Yeah, as much as we all try to make sure this is a session, I'm planning it. I don't want audience to be affected, and we are in stable 5-5, but something goes off. I'm just one way chit chatting with our audience, Malini. But
Yeah,
glad you
sorry
could
about that. Yes,
join back.
got
No, don't
yeah.
worry. It happens. And but thank you for joining back. I was just asking, do you find these sessions of value? Do you learn from it? And got back some comments from Parth and Puneet that they, and others that they do find it useful. But closing my question, Malini, how do you communicate your message to multiple groups of customers of yours, right? They're not all the same. So, what channels do you use? How do you nuance the messages? How did you figure that out?
So yeah, I mean, like, I mean, I just starting off from saying that, okay, let's target tier two, tier three was how we, like, I mean, that's a white space we found. And now we try to dig deeper into it. Okay, is it like, every age group in tier two, tier three? Is it any, like, even tier two, tier three also, is there a differentiation between, like, tier two versus tier three, because both of them work very, very differently? And then the other nuances of age, and the other nuances of gender. So we started digging deeper. We kind of made around 20, 25 cohorts. And what we try to do is we try to do A/B testing on each of these cohorts with multiple kinds of communication. So if you understand, that's like a lot of permutation combinations, and then we gave it some time to kind of, see what is working and then refining that further. That's something that definitely worked in our favor to kind of sharpen the TG who we want to talk to, and with what sort of communication. In this process, we also figured out, yes, right, I mean, a tier one consumer would want know about a niacinamide or a salicylic acid, but a tier 2 tier 3 consumer might not, but they do know that there is an ingredient out there which helps them in controlling oil or controlling sebum, and that's basically what they are aware of. So I think we will have to change the communication differently. For a tier 1 consumer, we will say, here you go, like, x% niacinamide or a y% salicylic acid product. But for a tier 2 tier 3 consumer, you will say that, okay, you're suffering from acne, and here you go, this is a product that can control oil. Or if you feel that, okay, you have really widened out pores, here is a product that can really help you in, like, I mean, in clearing them out. So I mean, I think that's the difference in messaging you will have to do. That also again means that you have to put yourselves in the shoes of the consumer, and understand where they are in this journey and what sort of language will they understand. So one is cohortizing and figuring out white spaces where exactly you don't have a lot of competition. So the metrics here is like, okay, you have higher CTRs, not higher CTRs, but I would say like lesser CPCs from a perf marketing perspective, lesser CPCs, and hence you're better ROAS. That's how you differentiate your cohorts. And on communication, of course, wherever your comms are giving you higher CTRs, or understanding the consumer, doing that consumer calls and say where in the journey is the consumer at. So you marry kind of both of them.
So, Malini, I want to ask you a different question as a founder, okay, and a female founder, obviously. Now, you started your company, and then in going along the journey, you got pregnant. Your daughter is now 2 years old. Congratulations. And through that process, you've been, of course, building the company, taking the time off that you need to take off when you need to take off. But you've been, staying with the beat and building the business. It's, I think, the challenges for a female founder are different, though, as much as we don't want to really discuss it, although you've been very open in sharing the joys of motherhood, but also some of the challenges in finding that balance, right? And I know, of course, my children are now very grown up, but in my entrepreneurial days, uh, and even though I was fortunate that my husband is very supportive, he's a very good father, but still my challenges as a mother and a founder were very different from his challenges of balancing work and fatherhood. So it's not to take away that for anyone, just making time through the intense periods of your career is not easy, male or female. But for the females, it is much, much more, right? And you've talked about it a lot. And I do want more women to know that it's possible. You get intimidated by it, and it's not easy. I mean, I don't want you to make it sound like, no, yeah, don't worry about it, everything will take care of itself. It won't. But you can do it, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
talk about that. What gave you those that strength, and in those moments which all of us will go through because we are human, to say, oh my god, how do I do this? So how did you work all this out?
Yeah, I mean, I think number one is having more examples around us. I mean, I was also, when I really, like, for the first time, I mean, when I came to know I was pregnant, I was really scared. I'm like, what is going to happen? Like, there is this baby which is Deconstruct, that's already existing, which is not fully mature, and then I'm here pregnant with a human baby, right? So that's the, and I think what really helped me then is finding out role models or examples who've done that before. I did reach out to a lot of women who actually, like, of course there were handful of them who actually gone through this process and they did the entire entrepreneurial journey, but I still reached out, and one very wise women then actually gave me advice, that it takes a village to start up and bring it up. It takes a village to kind of give birth to a baby and kind of grow the baby, right? So make sure your support system is strong. Make sure that when you are in the office, you are just not physically present but mentally present as well. And and I think I followed that advice very closely, and it did help me a lot. So I think definitely we need to have a lot more women role models who've done this, and that'll and we should talk a lot more about it. And I think that's where a lot of people will feel that it is possible, it is not impossible. Number two is, I think, when we go through all this, it does feel like, oh my god, you're doing so much. But I feel it is a blessing in disguise. At least it turned out to be a blessing in disguise for me, because I felt, you really cut the noise and you know what to prioritize, and focus comes to you very, very easily, because you only have these many hours and you have to achieve the impossible. So you very ruthlessly prioritize things.
Mm.
And that's, I think, ruthlessly prioritizing is, I think, a great skill set for any founder. And then I think, when you are going through pregnancy and childbirth, it only brings that clarity a lot more, because you just don't have that time physically available. So I think, it's, I felt it was a blessing in disguise for me. And it just cut the noise and it let me concentrate on the business and what are the important things in the business. So
No,
I think that's
yeah.
the second one, I would say. I mean, it did help me a lot.
No, I agree with you. I think my prioritization skills, cutting down the noise, in fact, being able to constantly triage what's important, what's urgent, I think as a, uh, uh, it made me a better leader being a mother, I feel. But I'm very happy to see next generation of women like you continue to pursue your dreams and be role models and opening the making the road wider for others to follow. I'm very thrilled about that, and I'm also appreciate how you, not this session but even outside of this also, you talk a lot about your journey, which I think is useful for others too. But as a founder, is there a moment for you where you dreamt, uh, that I want to be a founder, I want to build a company? So, what was that moment for you? How old were you, and what triggered it? Because long before you become a founder, the genesis of the idea starts from somewhere that you want to do it, you can do it. So, what was that origin story for you?
So I think for me here again, it's a woman, I would say, which is my mother.
Ah,
She's an entrepreneur herself without calling herself an entrepreneur or a founder. She's a doctor. She runs her own hospital, and she kind of, at the age of 60, went and did an MBA course because she wants to understand more about hospital management. So
ah,
I think, she's been my inspiration. She's been my motivation and, push for me as well. And I think, though of course I never dreamt about, okay, I want to be an entrepreneur or a founder, but I think those kind of genes or those kind of traits were definitely implanted very young in me.
mm,
And she was always the one who said that, don't shy away from something just because it feels or looks impossible, so just go for it. And of course she's been my great support system even through my entire childbirth, and about and what I'm going through currently. So that's been my inspiration, as I said. And even when I was young, she was a doctor. My brother is a doctor, but then always what she told is that, okay, here you go, these are all entrepreneurs. She used to show me, I clearly remember she used to show me. I don't know why she was very she really admired Kiran Mazumdar Shah a lot, and so she
of
used to
course.
give me whenever there's an article in the book or in Week or India Today, she used to hand it over, say that read. So I think that's kind of subconsciously got ingrained in me, though I never openly talked about it or thought about it. But then definitely a lot of those lessons were put to use today, now that I'm a founder, especially a female founder, and I'm like, trying to do or balance a lot of those things together. So yeah, I mean, that's been the motivation for me, I would say.
So you've done a great. First of all, thank you for that. And I have, after so many of these conversations, come to the both, maybe public and private. I've come to the conclusion that you take a successful woman, and behind her is a mother that inspired and provided support. So I would echo very much what you said about my mother also. But coming back to our conversation, uh, you've done a great job with Deconstruct. But what is another brand that you admired uh, in before you started Deconstruct, or admire now? Another brand besides your own?
So, I mean, I think definitely, before starting Deconstructing, even today, or at least till a few years ago, I definitely admired Ordinary. And why I
Mm.
admired Ordinary is because how, a person who doesn't understand anything about beauty, the founder, took it and then very first principally thought, can I reinvent the entire wheel? And that's basically, like, that's how he said that let's talk about ingredients, let's talk about separating out these ingredients, and giving it to the consumer so that consumers can do a mix and match. I think that's a brilliant first principles way of relooking at an industry that's always said that, okay, we'll always give you a mix of ingredients and we will always price it at a premium, like, and especially if the percentage is higher, or if it's working on your skin. So I think that that thought process is something what definitely, like, I admire. Though he's no more, the founder is no more today, and it's taken over by Estee Lauder, and they run based on that philosophy. But I think, like, the entire origin, the starting of The Ordinary is definitely inspirational, and I love that brand for it.
One last question, because I know we are up at in terms of time, but your tip for a first time founder, especially maybe someone in a consumer space?
Yeah, I think just know your consumer. Like, know your consumer so sharply. You please know what they do from morning to evening. Know their routines. Where do they shop? What do they shop along with your brands? What do they consume? So I think there is no other substitute than knowing your consumer very, very well. So that's my tip. And second, I think, as an entrepreneur, please don't give up. Like, just keep trying.
I think on that note, please don't give up is actually a very, very good advice. And you look at so many companies that today are very successful, but all of them, some stories are more publicized, some are not. All of them have had their near death experiences and moments of doubt from people external to your company. You yourself might have had doubt. So I think don't quit if you believe. Of course, it may be that you say, this is not the path I want to be on, and that's fine. But if you believe, don't quit. I think that's a great advice, Malini. And I really enjoyed this conversation. Wish you all the success in continuing to build a great company, a great brand, and lead the way for many, many more people.
Thank you, Vani. Thank you so much, for having this conversation. And I hope everyone has found it useful. And thanks so much for this opportunity.
And thank you, audience, for joining us. And we'll please continue to put comments on your LinkedIn, and we'll respond and answer where it's possible to do. But thank you for joining, and thank you, Malini. We'll chat soon more.
Thank you. Bye bye.